1. March, 1965. My dearest Suzie, how are you and the boys getting along? I hope you haven't had any more sickness. I got a letter from you today and was real glad to get it. I'm getting mail pretty regularly now. Things are the same over here now. Very quiet. I'm not flying today. I sent some more jewelry today. The earrings are for you. I hope you like them. I don't think the metal is as good as your pin, but they will go with it anyway. The pin is for Shirley. Tell her I couldn't find another one like yours. The one I sent was as close as I could get it. The bracelet is for Glenda. I was in town yesterday and I looked for a jewelry box for your mother, but I couldn't find a nice one, so I'll wait till I go to Saigon. They have some nice ones there. I guess I might as well tell you now. I joined the armed platoon here. I was so bored with flying troop ships that I decided a change might help. I haven't started flying with them yet, but I will Saturday. I will have a lot to learn, and it will all be new as I figure time will go faster. I was getting tired of being a taxi driver. There was supposed to be a formation Saturday to award our air medals, but everybody had to work, so we couldn't have it. Now, I don't know when they will get around to it. Anyway, I know I have one. I was planning to send the medal when I got it, but I can't. We have to turn it in before every ceremony so they can put the new clusters on them. See, they only give you the first medal, and for every one that you earn after that, you get an oak leaf cluster for the first one. I have actually earned 6 so far, but there's no telling how long it will take to get them issued. Well, that is about it for today. I love you all and miss you very much. We are almost halfway finished. Love you. Bill. The first thing about this letter that fascinates me is his mention of jewelry, yet again. Still, I can't believe how much he prioritized getting people jewelry and souvenirs, almost like he was on vacation and wasn't regularly getting shot at. Perhaps he was more sentimental than I give him credit for. Clearly, he cared about his family and wanted to give them things to remember his service and travels by. I guess the jewelry was his way of doing it. It all reminds me of when we were cleaning out Meemaw's trailer before she moved, and she insisted on giving me most of her jewelry box, mostly the things she knew she would never wear again. There honestly wasn't much of value in there, she kept all the gold and silver things, but instead it was filled with what felt to be trinkets and odds and ends from Popi's service. The articulating fish he mentioned a few letters ago was in there. So were many pins that he used to own, most of which seemed to be from Germany. They celebrated mountaineering or some landmark he likely visited while he was stationed over there. There were also some necklaces that were either real or fake ivory or bone. A big bedazzled pin that read Jesus, a few pair of cufflinks, one of which I wore for my wedding, and a necklace that matches Meemaw's princess ring but is loaded with fake gemstones and metal. Meemaw was happy I was interested in these things, almost as if they were museum pieces. Their value was completely historical and sentimental to me, and maybe that's all I need. They are tangible connections to these letters and his travels. The next thing I find fascinating is his transfer to the Cobras. Though he may have already been flying what were considered, quote, combat missions, these typically were accidental. He didn't set off that day with armaments attached to his Huey, planning to blow things up. Often he was, as he puts it, a taxi driver who got shot at and had to defend himself. This transfer to the Cobras was deliberate, a choice to become more active in the offensive side of the war. He wouldn't be flying medevac or troop lift as often, but he would be firing rockets and unloading hellfire on the VC. What boggles my mind is his decision to put himself in greater danger. For someone who has expressed multiple times that he's afraid of getting shot at and hated the run-ins with the enemy, he certainly didn't put himself in a good position to avoid those things. Contrarily, he put a target on his back. Why would the enemy shoot at helicopters transporting the wounded and dead instead of the ones shooting at them? Was he really this bored? Does this mean that boredom overcomes fear as a motivator? Perhaps instead he wanted to grant himself some agency. Perhaps he felt like he was going to get shot at anyway, and if he had rockets attached to his helicopter and door gunners, he at least had some power to defend himself, to get back at the people who have cost him so much in the months that he had already been there. Either way, I find that interesting. What does that say about war, masculinity, and imperialism? That a soldier with almost no vested interest in the conflict would rather trade safety for excitement. The photo I chose for today may be one of the most aesthetically pleasing. It is a helicopter in the sky. If you look closely, the front has a Cobra on it. The back says Army. Behind the door is a rocket pod and some guns. March 3. Dearest Suzie, received your letter today and was real happy to hear from you. I also got a letter from Grandma and Al and B. I wish you could have told me where Sandy is being stationed over here. If he is up around Da Nang, and I'm sure he is, then the chance of my seeing him is very slim, but if he is going to be in Saigon, then it shouldn't be a problem. I still haven't received orders for my next duty assignment yet, but I expect them within the next 4 or 5 weeks. I'll let you know as soon as I get them. I sent Audrey a bracelet today. I remember that the one I sent her before didn't fit, so I got another one. It isn't much, but it is real cute. Also, I got a bill with the estimate of what it will cost to get our camera fixed. Today I have to send them a money order for $12 before they will fix it. So I'm going to send them the money Monday, and I'm going to have them send it to you when it is repaired. I still have the instruction book, but I will send it to you before you get the camera. I'm glad Brian asks for his daddy. I just hope he doesn't forget me during the next few months. Oh, yes, how about sending me a small portrait-type picture of yourself? I want to get some pictures made for my wall. I have Billy's school picture and a good one of Brian, but I don't have one of you. One of your old ones would be okay. You haven't changed that much. Things are about the same over here. We had a VC hunt just south of Saigon today. We were gone all day. Tomorrow we have another one. I just found out that I have a night patrol, so I have to go out and fly at 10 o'clock. So I guess I will close for now. I love you all dearly and miss you very much. All my love. Bill. In today's letter, Bill talks about receiving letters from his family, sending a small gift to his niece, and taking care of household matters, even from halfway across the globe. But what stands out is the brief mention at the end. I just found out that I have a night patrol tonight, so I have to go out and fly at 10 o'clock. Night patrols were a crucial part of helicopter operations in Vietnam, and they carried significant risks. Under the cover of darkness, helicopter crews flew reconnaissance missions, transported troops, and scouted for Viet Cong movements. Visibility was limited, navigation was more difficult, and the danger of ambushes or enemy fire was heightened. Night missions added another layer of psychological strain to an already demanding routine. The darkness didn't just obscure the landscape below, it heightened the isolation and fear that came with every flight. During the day, at least the jungle was visible, even if it concealed hidden dangers. At night, the world below became an abstract patchwork of shadows where every flicker of movement or distant sound could signal an ambush. The sound of the rotors would announce their presence long before they were in visual range, making them vulnerable without ever seeing where the threat might come from. Helicopters flying night patrols were often tasked with flare drops, illuminating the landscape for ground forces or other aircraft. But those same flares made the aircraft itself an easy target. Even with the extra danger, night patrols were considered essential for maintaining pressure on the enemy and protecting bases. The Viet Cong preferred to move under the cover of darkness, so the men flying night missions were a vital part of disrupting their plans. Yet, like so much of his writing, Popi doesn't describe these missions with any sense of drama or heroism. Instead, it's just another job, another box to check before trying to grab whatever sleep he could before the next day's hunt. It's hard not to wonder how these flights weighed on him. The exhaustion must have seeped into everything. The constant cycle of missions, waiting for letters, and trying to hold on to his connection with home. If fear was always present, maybe it became easier to push aside when the work never stopped. What comes through most is the routine of it all. The way life at war could make even the most dangerous assignments feel ordinary. One of the biggest challenges of night flying was the lack of proper night vision equipment. Pilots relied on moonlight, flares, and their own instincts to navigate. Sometimes, their own helicopters were bait, drawing enemy fire so ground forces could pinpoint enemy locations by tracking muzzle flashes or explosions of mortars and rockets. It was dangerous, unpredictable, and mentally exhausting work. Popi doesn't dwell on the danger in this letter, though. He simply states it as another part of the job. But his casual mention of it speaks volumes. Even in war, life moves on in the small, everyday ways, and he had to do his job no matter the danger. Interestingly enough, he also talks about fixing the family camera. Again, this has been a constant thorn in his side, as he's tried to get his camera fixed and sent to Meemaw so she could send him back slides. Once again, it's amazing to think that among the dozens of other things for him to stress about, he had to worry about repairing a camera. The photo I chose for today was taken from a cockpit. The control panel is in the foreground and out of focus. The background features the Vietnamese landscape, as well as the top half of a helicopter flying to the right of the pilot. Mar, 5, 1965. Dearest Suzie, how are you and the boys getting along? I hope this finds you all okay. I am on OD tonight, so I have been pretty busy. OD here is a lot different than in the States. We have the worry of being overrun, so we really have to check the guards close. And they sit there with their weapons loaded all the time. They've just started something new here, too. At midnight, I have to go out and check our outer perimeter guards. They are Vietnamese. This should be a real experience because you never know if they are going to get excited and take a pot shot at you. Yesterday was something, too. We had an operation down south of here, and for the first time since I've been in the gun platoon, I got face-to-face with the VC. The ground troops flushed about 40 of them out into an open field, and we went down to check them out. When they saw us, they threw down their weapons and started to run. We got right down, just off the ground, and rounded them up like cowboys rounding up cattle. We captured 25 and killed a few. I don't know exactly how many. But it was the best day we've had in a long time. They have another big operation tomorrow, but I won't get to go. The weather over here is the same. Miserable. But we should start getting some rain in the next couple of weeks. Maybe that will cool things off a little. I miss you all very much and love you too much. All my love. Bill. Today is another example where Popi wrote 2 letters. Here is the second. 5. Mar, 65. Dearest Suzie, I got a letter from you today, finally, and was glad to get it. I'm glad that you are all right. I'm sending you that money order that your mother sent to me. I can't cash it over here. I hope that you can cash it. I will send her a jewelry box as soon as I can find a nice one. I was real glad to hear that Johnny and the old man worked out a deal with the car. I was really worried about it. I had an unusual experience yesterday. I was on a regular mission hauling a colonel around. He was visiting the different province chiefs, who are the head Vietnamese in the different areas. When it came time to eat chow, we were all invited to eat with one of the province chiefs. We couldn't refuse because the colonel told us that would insult the chief. And also, if we didn't eat what was offered to us, it was an insult. So we went. The province chief lived in a nice 2-story French-style home. The dinner table was real long, and there were about 30 people at the table. Most of them were high-ranking American and ARVN officers. First thing they offered us was cognac. We could refuse that because we were flying. Then they tried to give us wine, and then beer, and finally cokes. Although they couldn't believe we couldn't drink the other stuff. The meal itself was 3-course. The first course was lobster. They were served whole, and they were only about 5 inches long. Naturally, I had to take one and eat at least part of it. There was no butter or sauce, only hot pepper and bread to go with it. You know I don't like that sort of thing anyway, and I thought I would gag when that damn lobster looked back at me. But I managed to get a little of it down. The next course was fish. I don't know what kind, but it was breaded and well done, so it went down a little easier. But again, there was no sauce or anything. Just fish and bread. The last course was steak, and surprised me because it was very good. It was served with French fries. It was cooked French style, a style called Chateaubriand. For dessert, we had a small fruit and some kind of syrup. It was called lychee nuts. They looked pretty good, but I took one bite and almost threw up. They taste terrible, and they were much too sweet. So I just said to hell with the province chief's feelings. I wasn't going to eat those things. Anyway, I hope I never get in a position where I have to eat with these people again. Today was moving day for me. I am now a Cobra. That's what our armed platoon calls themselves. They are called various things by other platoons, things like snakes, or worms, or privileged bastards, or SOBs, friendly things like that. But anyway, it should be pretty interesting for a while. I figure by the time I get bored over here, I will be so short, I won't care. I started growing a mustache about 2 weeks ago. That is the rage over here right now. But I couldn't stand it, so I cut it off today. But Lewis got a picture of it, so I will send you the picture when it is developed. Well, I guess I better close for today. I love you all very much and miss you. Kiss each of the boys for me. All my love. Bill. Today's letters give us two very different glimpses into Popi's life in Vietnam. One full of tension, and the other marked by an almost surreal sense of formality. The first letter opens with Bill writing on OD duty officer of the day. He's responsible for checking the guards posted around the base, but as always, the job comes with an extra layer of danger in Vietnam. The perimeter guards he's checking aren't American, they're South Vietnamese, and he admits matter-of-factly that he's not entirely sure if they'll recognize him or if they'll shoot first. This letter also marks a milestone in Bill's time with the gun platoon, the first time he writes about coming face-to-face with the enemy. He describes the moment almost like something out of a Western. 40 Viet Cong flushed into an open field, helicopters swooping low to round them up like cattle. It's a strange, detached way to describe something so violent, but maybe that's the only way to make sense of what he's seen. It's hard to imagine the tension of those nighttime checks, walking the perimeter with loaded weapons on both sides, hoping that a nervous guard doesn't mistake you for the enemy. This war was so often defined by uncertainty, and even though Popi doesn't linger on it for long, there's a subtle acknowledgement in this letter that the people protecting the base at night could just as easily be the ones threatening it. The second letter, written the same day, couldn't feel more different. Popi finds himself sitting down to a formal dinner with high-ranking Vietnamese officers, forced to navigate the delicate etiquette of diplomacy while trying not to gag on lobster and lychee nuts. As I've mentioned before, he was very solidly a meat and potatoes guy, and to hear him struggle with this meal is actually pretty entertaining. It's one of the only times so far that he lets humor come through in his writing, picturing him trying to choke down that lobster with its eyes still staring back at him, just to avoid insulting the hosts. But the absurdity of the meal doesn't completely cover the tension underneath. This kind of hospitality, French-style homes, multi-course meals, was often reserved for the South Vietnamese elite, who were accused of corruption and living in comfort while American soldiers fought and died on their behalf. These French homes also point to the history of colonialism in the Indo-Chinese region by nations like France. Even though they are gone, their presence is still felt. In this letter, Popi shares that he's officially been assigned to the armed platoon, the Cobras. It's another step deeper into the danger of combat flying. The other platoons had nicknames for the Cobras: snakes, worms, privileged bastards. It was the kind of teasing that masked something heavier. The men in the gun platoon flew more missions, took more risks, and lost more lives. But instead of writing about fear, Popi jokes about trying to grow a mustache, a little act of rebellion in the middle of everything. Though he ends up shaving it in the letter, it becomes something he keeps for the rest of his life. One of the things that stands out most in these letters is how much space Popi gives to describing the meal. Food can become a strange kind of memory anchor, especially in times of war. It's a sensory experience that ties you to a specific place and moment. Even though he hated the lobster and the lychee nuts, he still took the time to write about them. As an anthropologist, I would say we're obligated to share meals with people. Food and table manners say a lot about a culture and their values. Knowing he was given this opportunity excites me. It's a true glimpse into the lives of the people he's fighting alongside. In these letters, Popi moves through worlds that don't quite make sense together. One minute circling over fields in a helicopter, the next trying to mind his table manners in a setting strange to him. But beneath it all is the steady rhythm of life at war. Missions, letters, missing home, and trying to hold on to whatever pieces of normalcy he can. The photo I chose for today depicts an offensive position on a perimeter of what I can assume is a base. It is elevated and has sandbags stacked against the walls, with earth used as fencing on either side. Are these the walls he had to check that night? March 6, 65. Dearest Suzie, I am very tired tonight. I was up all night last night on OD and up most of the day today. I managed to get a couple of hours of sleep early this morning, but I still feel bushed. I got a letter from you today and was glad to hear that everybody is well. Today was a terrible day for the Cobras. Of course, I didn't go with them today, but they ran into some real heavy resistance and we lost 2 aircraft. Both of them are burned up. The whole 4-man crew on one of them was lost. The 2 pilots were fine people and real good friends of mine. So, of course, I'm real upset about their death. The other plane fared better. No one was hurt from that crew, but it was a terrible blow just to lose one good crew in this ridiculous war. Otherwise, I am afraid there is no news from here. Charlie and Doll are getting along fine. I still have them caged up. We had a cat come down with rabies the other day, so I have to keep them locked up for 2 weeks to see if they show any signs. I don't expect any trouble out of this, though, as they both have had rabies shots. How is Minnie getting along now? I had a letter from your mother yesterday, but she didn't mention Minnie. How are the boys getting along? Is Brett still teething? Does Brian still cry for me? How is Billy getting along in school? I miss you all very much. And I love you so much that all I can think of is getting home to you. I am lost without you. All my love, Bill. Today's letter finds Popi worn thin after long nights on duty and the loss of friends in combat. He writes with a weight we haven't seen in a while, grappling with death but still checking in on the small details of home. There's something haunting about this letter, not because Popi dwells on the tragedy, but because of how quietly he writes about it. 2 helicopters lost, 4 men killed. He doesn't name them, doesn't describe the crash, just says the whole 4-man crew on one of them was lost. They were fine people and real good friends of mine. It's one of the few times in his writing where the emotional weight feels close to the surface. The exhaustion in this letter isn't just physical. It's the kind of tiredness that comes when grief and routine blur together. Can we assume from what he's written before that he dealt with this loss by excessively drinking, like he had admitted to before? The loss of friends was a constant reality for helicopter crews in Vietnam. The Cobras, the armed platoon Popi had just joined, flew some of the most dangerous missions in the war. Gunships like the UH-1B Huey were faster and more heavily armed than troop transports, but that firepower came at a cost. They flew lower, stayed in combat zones longer, and often became targets themselves. When a helicopter went down, there was no armor to protect the crew, just thin aluminum skin and plexiglass windows between them and the firepower on the ground. Helicopters didn't just crash, they burned. The men who flew these missions knew how quickly everything could change. One moment you're flying next to your friends, the next, you're writing letters home about their deaths. And as a small reminder, he chose to join this platoon because it was more interesting than, quote, plain taxi driver. But what stands out most in this letter is how life kept moving. How Popi still clung to the small, ordinary routines that connected him to home. Even in the middle of morning, he's asked about the boys, making sure the base's pet monkeys, Charlie and Doll, are safe from rabies. That instinct to care for something, anything, feels like a small act of resistance against everything the war was stripping away. One of the hardest things about reading these letters is knowing how much he doesn't say. You can feel Popi trying to protect Meemaw from the worst of what he's feeling here. He doesn't tell her how those pilots died. He doesn't say how close those men were to him. He just asks if Brian still cries for him, if Billy's doing okay in school, if the baby is still teething. War forces people to live 2 lives at once. One life in the middle of danger, and another life that stretches across miles and oceans trying to hold on to the people waiting back home. In this letter, we once again see those 2 lives collide. The grief is there, just beneath the surface, but the routine wins out. Feed the monkeys, write to Suzie, ask about the boys, try to hold on until August. The photo I chose for today depicts Charlie and Doll in their homemade cage. One is grooming itself, the other is looking away through the chicken wire cage, clinging to a small rope. March 1965. Dearest Suzie, finally got a letter from you last night and was glad to hear from you. Looks like Brian is at that bad stage where he thinks he is a big boy and able to take off on his own. He's probably going to be a lot worse about taking off than Billy was. Although I remember Billy doing the same thing once. Remember that time in Germany? Well, I am about to get settled down in the Cobra platoon. I went to the range today and fired the machine guns and rockets. It was quite interesting, and I can see I have a lot to learn about armed ship flying. We have a USO show here tonight at 8 o'clock. Of course, everybody's looking forward to that. Anything to break the monotony. Well, it is Sunday, and everything is real quiet around here. We had a little bit of excitement yesterday. Some VC sneaked into the Army of Vietnam compound and blew up their fuel and ammo stock. It made quite a blaze. Well, I guess I will close for now. I love you all and miss you very much. I am still counting days, although it is very depressing to think about 200 more days away from you. All my love, Bill. In this letter, we get the sense that the war is changing. Popi is settling into his new role in the Cobra platoon, training on machine guns and rockets and trying to break the monotony with the USO show. With that being said, behind the scenes, the men steering U.S. strategy were starting to question the entire approach to the war. While Popi was out on the firing range, training to fly gunships and adjusting to his new position, a very different kind of battle was playing out in Washington. On March 6th, just one day before this letter, McGeorge Bundy, President Lyndon Johnson's national security advisor, wrote a memo to the president that questioned the entire foundation of the American war effort. He summarized something that had been quietly building among policymakers for months. He is quoted as saying, "Last night Bob McNamara said for the first time what many others have thought for a long time, that the Pentagon and the military have been going at this thing the wrong way round from the very beginning. They've been concentrating on military results against guerrillas in the field, when they should have been concentrating on intense police control from the individual villager on up." Bundy was one of the key architects of the American foreign policy during the early years of the Vietnam War. He wasn't a military man. He came from Harvard and served as one of the youngest national security advisors in U.S. history. Alongside Defense Secretary Robert McNamara, Bundy was one of the most influential voices pushing for deeper American involvement in Vietnam. But by early 1965, cracks were already starting to show in the U.S. strategy. The war was supposed to be about fighting communism. But how do you fight an ideology with airstrikes and gunships? Bundy's memo cut right to the heart of that question. American forces were chasing down Viet Cong fighters in the field, but they were losing the bigger battle for control of the countryside, where the real power of the insurgency lived. The war was being fought village by village, and no amount of helicopters or bombs could win the loyalty of the people. We have almost seen this thus far with Popi's limited involvement fighting the VC directly. There haven't been many instances of direct combat, and oftentimes he's getting shot at by people hidden in the jungle. Reading Popi's letters with that memo in mind makes you realize just how disconnected the war was, how different the experience was depending on where you stood. For the men flying missions every day, the war was all about action, how many missions you flew, how many weapons you fired, how many VC you rounded up or killed. That was the job they'd been sent to do. But even Popi hints at the blurred lines between friend and enemy in the countryside. Just 2 days before this letter, he wrote about checking Vietnamese perimeter guards, wondering if they might accidentally shoot him in the dark. Now, in this letter, the enemy slips inside the wire at an ARVN base and blows up an ammo stock from within the very compound that was supposed to be secure. One of the quiet undercurrents of this letter, and so many of Popi's letters, is how much of war was just waiting. It's something that doesn't always come through in movies or history books, but some soldiers in Vietnam spent more time fighting boredom than they did fighting the enemy. Even something like a USO show, just a handful of entertainers flown in to sing songs or tell jokes, became a major event. Anything to break the monotony. One of the things I've been thinking about a lot while reading these letters is how the slow grind of time played a role in how soldiers experienced the war. At this point, Popi is still hopeful, still throwing himself into the new challenge of learning the Cobras' weapon systems. But the longer he stays, the harder it becomes to maintain that sense of purpose. What happens to someone when they're constantly switching between bursts of action and long stretches of waiting, between adrenaline and boredom? How does that change the programming in your brain? The photo I chose for today actually depicts Popi's point of view while at the range. What makes this different than a standard range for a ground soldier is that, as a Cobra, he had to practice firing his weapon systems from his helicopter. If you look closely, you can see the red streaks of rockets on the left side of the screen. On the right is a plume of smoke. They are firing at nothing in particular on the ground. March 1965. My dearest Suzie, I received your letter in the bonds today, and although the letter did upset me, I am more worried about you not having enough money this month. Especially when it is my fault in the first place. And now I can't even get the bonds cashed over here. I tried the club and PX in post office. Those are the only places we have, and none of them can cash them. So all I can do is sign them for you and hope that someone will cash them for you. Let me know right away as soon as you get them, so I'll at least know that you got them okay. Now about your problems there with my folks. I feel like if either one of us is to blame, it is me. You did right to write and let me know what they were planning, so you haven't done anything wrong. I maybe got a little too mad and wrote them too soon. In fact, if I had waited 2 days to say anything, I would have gotten your second letter telling me that Dad was going to keep the car. So I might be a little at fault for that, and I did sit right down and apologize for my first letter. However, I think that the big fault lies in them. I felt like they could have at least written and told me what they planned. I wouldn't have felt so bad about it. Even if they had wrote and said they wanted to let Jim take it, at least I would have known what they were interested in and how I felt about it. But they didn't write then, and I still haven't heard from them. I know that you were upset when you wrote to me this last time, and with good reason, but honey, you are a really mature woman now, and things like this shouldn't get you down so easily. I know that this is a rough time for you, having to take care of the kids alone, worry about the car, worry about money, and worry about me, as I am sure you must. But please don't let things like this upset you so. You are my wife. Probably the only one I'll ever have, and your feelings are much more important to me than any words the old man or Johnny could ever say. And as for any picture Mom might have, I don't know what you are talking about. And anyway, I will get that straightened out when I get home. Now, don't misunderstand me in this letter. I don't want you to get the idea that I don't want to hear about your problems. You damn well better tell me when you have troubles. And you said it right in your letter. I'm the one you are supposed to talk to. My point is this. I don't want these things upsetting you. One thing that really does upset me is the dirty words that you used in your letter. That was not like you at all. Now, we have had 2 great years together, and as far as I'm concerned, the only reason we had trouble before is because we were both kids. But I would like to have about 50 years just like the last 2. So before you go doing anything rash, remember one thing. You are just about completely on your own. You can pick your friends, and just about so as you please. If you feel like you don't want to see or talk to any of my folks, it won't bother me a bit. The only thing that I ask of you is that you continue to take care of our boys the best you can on what little money you get and be true to me in everything that you do. We are at the halfway point now. We only have 6 months to wait to all be together again. That isn't long. I wish that I had the money right now. I would ask for a 3-day pass and go to Saigon and call you, but I don't right now. But as soon after payday as I can get up there, I will call you. That will give you something to look forward to. The reason I have a 3-day pass is because they can only put calls through for 3 hours a day, and there is a heck of a waiting list. But you can look forward to a call between the 1st and the 10th if nothing happens. I have your number. I heard from your mother about 3 days ago. She said she had talked to John, and they got the dolls, and that Bea had been sick is the reason she hadn't written to me. Well, I guess I had better close for now. I love you very much, and I miss you something terrible. I'm sorry about all the trouble. All my love, Bill. In this letter, we see what is one of the most personal glimpses into Meemaw and Popi's relationship. Though she won't give me many details about what they are arguing over, to be honest, I don't think she remembers them very well, we see some conflict about the car pop up again. This was mentioned a few weeks ago, and it seems like Meemaw is attempting to resolve the transferring of the ownership of a car between her and Popi and one of his brothers. Popi, as a diligent son, is struggling with balancing his relationship with his parents and siblings alongside his marriage and relationship with his children. This is an experience that I'm sure many young men can relate to around his age. At one point, he writes, "You are my wife, probably the only one I'll ever have," which ended up being true, though I know Meemaw and he had their problems. He also wrote, "One thing that really does upset me is the dirty words that you used in your letter." I find this to be pretty hilarious. Meemaw is ubiquitously known to have a mouth like a sailor. I assure you that I've inherited that from her, though I'm working on it, and it's funny to think that among all his other worries, he wants to chastise her for her language. This letter ultimately gives us a glimpse into how Popi, or really any soldier, may attempt to mediate personal struggles between his family, as well as poorly budgeting for the month, while overseas and fighting in a war. This is an example of the real, personal side of history. It doesn't tell us anything about a great battle or an evil general, but it does show us what most of the people fighting in wars actually have to think about. It's a sobering reminder of how good life is for those of us that don't have to make this sort of sacrifice. The photo I chose for today depicts a group of women in a town. They are all wearing bright white dresses and conical hats. They are holding briefcases. Though this photo doesn't have much of a connection to the letter, it gives us a glimpse into what the soldiers may have seen while visiting town. It was a noteworthy sight enough for Popi to take a picture of. March 11, 1965. Dearest Suzie, please excuse my paper. This was all I could get my hands on right now. Anyway, it is paper. How is everything around there? How is the car getting along? I hope it isn't giving you a lot of trouble. How about my window above the air conditioner? Is it holding out okay? I have just about made a reputation over here as a jinx to fly with. Let me tell you about my troubles with aircraft. Last month, I was getting a check out for IP. I was riding with the company's standardization pilot, and he was going to show me a good auto rotation. He tore the tail stinger off of one. So we went in and got another one. He said he wanted me to try one since he had messed up the first one. So when I came in, I was worried about my tail stinger, so I came in nose low and broke both of the little windows in the front and put a big dent in the nose of it. Then, about a week later, I totaled one. That's the one I told you about before. Okay, last week we had a troop lift at 4 o'clock in the morning. I had a brand new second sergeant flying with me, and I was going to check him out. We were flying along and we lost our hydraulic system. Without that, you just can't hardly handle the aircraft. Anyway, there I was, pitch dark, in formation, a brand new pilot, a full load of troops, and no hydraulics. That is real trouble. The only way you can get one on the ground like that is just fly it on like a fixed wing, because you sure can't pull pitch. It's not bad during the day, but at night it makes you sweat. Anyway, we got it in all right. Does that sound to you like I'm having bad luck? Wait, there's more. Day before yesterday, I went out to take my monthly check ride with another IP. We practiced a landing with the throttle in manual position. We do this so that if you ever lose a throttle governor, you know how to fly it by operating the throttle like a motorcycle grip. And you have to be real careful. If you roll the throttle just a fraction too far, it will ruin the engine. Anyway, I made a real good landing. Captain Kendrick was with me. He is an IP, too, and he was checking me out. So we were sitting on the runway, and he says, "I'll take it." I thought he was going to try an approach, and just about that time the tower is yelling at us to hurry up, and I looked around to see if one was coming in behind us. While I was looking around, he rolled on full throttle. He ruined an engine, rotor system, tail rotor, and everything else in the powertrain. It was strictly his fault, and he is very quick to tell everybody that he was plain careless and everything. But the point is, I was in the airplane. So everybody starts kidding me about having a black cloud over my head and being a jinx. There's more. This morning, about 3 o'clock, we had an outpost, a little place called Quezon, overrun by the VC. They called us to go out and chase them off. I flew with the platoon leader in the rocket ship. It carries 48 rockets, and we call it the Hog. Now, this was the first time I'd ever been in the Hog, so I didn't know a thing about rocket systems. So anyway, we were flying along, and Captain Molinelli decides to fire a couple of rockets. He pulled the trigger, and nothing happened. So he thought he didn't have the system on. There are 3 switches on the console to operate the rocket system. One is to arm them, one is to light up the sight, and one is to jettison the whole thing in case one of them catches a fire. Guess which switch he hit? You guessed it. He threw the whole set, 48 rockets and $5,000 worth of launchers away. So this morning we had to go out and spend the whole morning recovering them. Of course, they weren't any good and we dumped them in a river, but at least the VC didn't get them. Again, it was certainly not my fault because I didn't even know about the switches, but you can imagine the kidding I had to take today. Everybody is singing "Black Cloud Hanging Over My Head" every time they see me coming. It's all in fun, though. When I first came to the armed platoon, Molinelli, the platoon leader, told me that it generally takes 30 to 60 days just to become an aircraft commander in the gunships, since there's so much to learn about tactics and the guns and all. So a guy starts out in the left seat. His job is strictly to fire machine guns. Each ship has 4 guns and 14 rockets. The aircraft commander sits in the right seat. He flies and fires rockets. This is what I was looking forward to. 30 to 60 days to just kind of sit back and learn the business. The first 2 days, I flew the left seat and fired the machine guns and loved it. I had a lot of fun on the range. Then, yesterday, we started to the range and Molinelli wanted me to fly right seat just to see what it was like. So he put me with the best rocket man in the platoon. So we went out. I was either darn lucky or a heck of a rocket man. He had to explain the sight to me before we went out, since I had never seen one of them before, but we got to the range and I started blasting. You only get 7 shots, 2 rockets at a time. I fired the first 2 at a house and missed, but I figured out the sight on the first pass. On the second pass, he showed me a house hut and I blew it apart. And the next 5. He couldn't believe it. When we came in, he told Molinelli that my place was in the hog. The hog carries 48 rockets, no machine guns. So, that is why I was riding with him in the hog this morning. Rocket men are hard to come by, I guess, so now I am training to take over the hog. My life as a machine gunner was pretty short. That is, if I do okay in the rockets. They are certainly a challenge. The aircraft has to be set up exactly right before you can fire, so it has taken some doing. I'll bet I'm putting you to sleep with all this rambling. Like reading a dull book, huh? I'm pretty satisfied so far, but of course I haven't been shot at yet. I don't know what I'll think about when I do get shot at. Oh yes, I'm also a platoon instrument IP now in addition to everything else. So every time we have a little time I have to take someone up for hood training. I have the only instrument ticket in the platoon. This is just one more thing to keep me busy, for which I'm thankful. Well, I didn't intend for this to turn into a book, but I'm just in a writing mood tonight. Did you give Shirley her pin yet? Tell her I hope she likes it. There's a little gift shop down here that has those things, and they only cost about $1, so I'm going to bring you a lot of that kind of stuff when I come home. I still didn't get that camera yet. I love you and miss you all very much. Say hello to the boys for me, and tell Brian that I said he better be a good boy. All my love. Bill. War is unpredictable, but sometimes the bad luck seems to follow certain people more than others. In today's letter, Popi shares a story that feels almost like a comedy of errors, if the stakes weren't so high. From wrecked helicopters to accidentally jettisoned rockets, he starts to build a reputation among his fellow pilots as a man with a black cloud hanging over his head. But woven into the humor is something deeper. A glimpse at the sheer pressure of what these men were learning to do and how quickly the war was demanding they become experts at things they'd never imagined they'd be doing. This letter feels like one of those rare moments where you can almost hear Popi's voice. Not just in what he's saying, but in how he's saying it. It's longer than most of his letters so far, full of self-deprecating humor, rambling stories, and those little asides that make the whole thing feel like he's talking to Meemaw across the dinner table. At first glance, it reads like light-hearted banter, a man trying to make his wife smile from half a world away. But underneath the humor, you can feel how fast everything is moving. It's only been about 3 weeks since Popi joined the Cobra platoon, and he's already hurtling towards a new role. Not just as a machine gunner, but as a rocket man, flying some of the deadliest helicopters in the war. He thought he'd have 30 to 60 days to learn the ropes. He barely got 2. The helicopter Popi keeps calling the Hog was a Huey with the M3 rocket system, a heavily armed gunship version of the standard troop transport helicopter. The Hog carried 48 rockets mounted on pods under its stubby wings. Unlike the other gunships, which had machine guns along with rockets, the Hog was designed for one thing: firepower. Popi's role as the rocket man meant he wasn't just along for the ride anymore. He was the one pulling the trigger, aiming those rockets at targets on the ground. It was a whole new kind of flying. Part pilot, part gunner, and one more layer of responsibility added to everything else he was carrying. The Black Cloud reputation he mentions might have started out as a joke, but there's something really revealing about how Popi tells these stories. Every mishap he writes about comes with a lesson. The auto-rotation landing teaches him to be careful of his nose angle. The hydraulic failure forces him to keep his cool in the dark. The rocket systems give him a crash course in precision flying. Even the jettisoned rocket pods, $5,000 worth of equipment dumped into a river, become another story tucked into the back of his mind for next time. He's learning how to survive, one mistake at a time. He might joke about the bad luck, but there's no denying that the platoon is already starting to rely on him in ways he probably never expected. What really struck me while reading this letter is how much responsibility Popi is carrying, even when he's downplaying it. He's not just flying missions anymore, he's an instrument instructor, taking other pilots up for training flights whenever there's downtime. He's learning rockets, flying night missions, and helping check out new pilots like the young sergeant who flew with him during the hydraulic failure. One line near the end of the letter jumped out at me. I'm pretty satisfied so far, but of course I haven't been shot at yet. It's such a casual little throwaway, almost like he's trying to reassure Suzie that everything is fine. But the whole letter is building toward that moment. Every story about wrecked helicopters and near misses is really about how much of this war is out of his control. The bad luck might feel like a black cloud now, but he's still waiting to see what happens when the cloud finally breaks. One of the strangest rhythms of the Vietnam War, and one that Popi's letters are starting to show more and more, is how quickly things could shift from boredom to chaos. One minute you're sitting in the mess hall joking with the guys about being a jinx. The next you're scrambling into a helicopter at 3 a.m. to fly into an outpost that's just been overrun by the Viet Cong. There's never any way to know which kind of day it's going to be. And that might be the hardest part. Not the danger itself, but the waiting for the danger to come. By this point in the letters, Popi is starting to transform. From a fresh arrival, still figuring out the rhythm of life in Vietnam, to someone the platoon is already starting to lean on. The Black Cloud jokes might seem like just that, jokes, but they're also a sign that he's becoming a part of the group. He's taking on more responsibility, learning faster than anyone expected, and trying to hold on to his sense of humor along the way. The photo I chose for today is an overhead shot of a 3-sided military outpost. It is clearly dug into the ground with 3 towers. To the left, there is a river. Though this likely isn't the outpost they were called to, it is at least a good example of what sort of things they saw from the air. "195 to go. March 12, 1965. Dearest Suzie, I got my birthday present today, and I really like it. Of course, I don't have any need for it over here, but it will come in handy when I get home. I really do like it. How in the world did you ever hurt your back? I'm real sorry to hear that you're having trouble with it, and I hope it is better now. You better learn to be careful before you break your neck. I figured surely you would like that pin. They have them with different colored stones. I am planning to bring you a bunch of them when I come home. You are glad I'm not in Da Nang, but I'll tell you, one place in Vietnam is as bad as the other. I'm kind of glad I'm not up there either, but at least it is not so blooming hot up there. We are about to burn up down here. The heat is unbearable. We had a troop lift this morning, my first since I got to the Cobras. We took off this morning at 5 o'clock, and I went to a small town about 30 miles from here called Ma Qua. We sat on the airfield there with the reserve force until 1 o'clock in the afternoon. The main body of troops were supposed to clean out an area, and they didn't run into one VC, so at 1 o'clock we were released. We went from there to the range, and I got to fire the hog. So I guess now I am going to be the platoon rocket man. Should be quite a challenge for a while. Tonight we got a call about 6 o'clock from an outpost across the river from our airfield that there was a battalion of VC in the area. So we went out and flew around there for 2 hours. We didn't find anything, though. It's about 9 o'clock now, and I'm sitting here writing this letter and listening to Radio Peking. They are a Chinese communist station, and they've been talking for the past hour about how bad Americans are and how we are over here to take over the country and how they are going to run all American imperialists out of South Vietnam. I get a kick out of listening to them. Well, I guess I will close for now. I love you all very much. Kiss the boys for me and tell them I love them. And you take care of yourself. All my love. Bill. Today's episode is notable for its mention of Radio Peking, a Chinese communist broadcast station. Radio Peking was a key tool of Chinese propaganda during the Cold War and the Vietnam War. It targeted both American soldiers and the general public, broadcasting messages designed to undermine the U.S. military's presence in Southeast Asia. The station frequently aired hostile rhetoric, accusing the United States of imperialism and declaring that the country would be driven out of Vietnam by communist forces. In his letter, Popi shares that he's been listening to Radio Peking as they criticize the U.S. military, calling out Americans as imperialists trying to take over the country. What's interesting is that he doesn't express anger or frustration at the station's message. Instead, he seems somewhat amused, saying, I get a kick out of listening to them. This response is fascinating because it shows how Bill, like many soldiers, might have been trying to keep a sense of humor in a situation that was anything but funny. It's a reminder that even in the midst of war, soldiers had to find ways to cope with the psychological toll of constant exposure to hostile propaganda, not to mention the stresses of daily military life. Bill's reaction also speaks to the broader psychological warfare at play during the war. While the enemy's broadcasts were designed to demoralize American troops, Bill's ability to laugh at them could be seen as a form of resilience, one of the ways soldiers maintained their mental toughness. We also know that at this point, Popi had himself already been engaged in psychological warfare operations, flying a helicopter with speakers attached over enemy territory, blasting out pre-recorded messages. He also helped disperse propaganda pamphlets written in Vietnamese, which they released over villages, trying to encourage the general public to be on the same side as Arvin in the U.S. This letter reminds us that the war wasn't just fought on the ground, but it was also fought in the minds of the soldiers and the civilians, listening to broadcasts like Radio Peking. The messages they heard every day, whether from their superiors, the enemy, or even their own side, shaped their experience of the war, making it a battle for both the body and the mind. The photo I chose for today is one of my favorites. It's taken on a tarmac at an airfield. It depicts a group of people unloading a medevac helicopter, placing a person into an ambulance. This is a great picture, clear and full of action. March 15, 1965. Dearest Suzie, how are you and the boys getting along? I hope you're all right. Things are about the same for me. We had a pretty quiet weekend. I got a birthday card and a letter from Laverne yesterday. She said she finally had all her teeth pulled. I was glad to hear it. I imagine she feels a lot better now. I also got a birthday card from your mother yesterday. Today I got one from Colonel Kretlov, that insurance man from Benin. I have been injured. Yesterday we were flying along one of those canals when all of a sudden the VC opened up with their guns and shot us down. In the process of landing the helicopter, I sprained my right foot. Doesn't that sound exciting? A real good story, huh? Only, it is a lie. What really happened was this. Yesterday morning, I walked out of my hooch, and Charlie was on the roof, and he had his rope all tangled up in the power lines. So I was going to climb up and untangle him. I fell and landed on my ankle and sprained it. It's not too bad, though. I was off flying status yesterday, but I am back on today. Well, I hate to send you a one-page letter, but as I said, we had a quiet weekend. I love you all and miss you. I was glad to hear Billy is doing well in school, but I know he is capable. All my love, Bill. At first glance, today's letter seems pretty uneventful. Popi talks about getting birthday cards, catching up with family, and even cracks a joke about a relative finally getting their teeth pulled. But then he casually drops a bombshell that he has been injured. For a split second, you can imagine the panic Meemaw might have felt reading those words. But then Popi launches into an exaggerated war story, making it sound like he was shot down in combat, like he was a hero and his injury was gained valiantly, fighting the enemy and sacrificing his body like all the other people he had helped save before, in a way which made sense with all the danger he had been put up to in this point. Before quickly admitting, only it is a lie. The real story? He sprained his ankle trying to help his pet monkey untangle a rope from the power lines. This letter is a great example of Bill's storytelling style and his ability to use humor, even when delivering potentially alarming news. He knew that Suzie was worrying about him every day, and instead of feeding into that anxiety, he found a way to make her smile. Plus, it is a way of turning an embarrassing injury into something he can laugh about. Of course, he would feel somewhat silly, getting hurt in such a trivial and accidental way when he has friends who are getting hurt much worse in more justified ways. Popi's story also gives us a small but telling glimpse into life at base. He doesn't dwell on combat operations or dangers in this letter, like he does so many other times before, but instead he focuses on small personal moments, letters from home, a minor injury, and even Charlie getting into trouble. This is one of the things I find so fascinating about his letters in this project. Even in the middle of a war zone, it is the preposterous, nonsensical things which we are drawn to. They are the things worth sharing. Combat operations become commonplace, and twisting your ankle because you climbed up on a roof becomes noteworthy. There's also something to be said about the way soldiers like Popi relayed information home. Many men in Vietnam downplayed their injuries, hardships, or dangers to avoid worrying their loved ones. Bill's sprained ankle might have been painful, but rather than focusing on that, he spins it into a lighthearted story. He may even have enjoyed the time off from the new and stressful expectations of combat operations, allowing himself a day to relax with his injury. Who knows? The photo I chose for today depicts Charlie and Doll sitting on the grass, eating tomatoes and lettuce. I assume they're eating table scraps. Behind them is a soldier's boot, clearly belonging to someone sitting on the ground with them, enjoying their company. Also, In addition to it being Poppy's birthday around this time, I'd like to wish a very quick happy birthday to my brother. He isn't listening because he's traveling, but I hope he enjoys this episode when he does. As always, beware the Ides of March. March 19th, 1965. Dearest Suzie, I'm sorry that I waited so long to write, but the last 3 days have been pretty busy. We had 3 troop operations, and we flew all day each day supporting them. My foot seemed to be getting along okay, so I was only grounded 1 day. So I went out and flew on these last 3 missions. Then yesterday, trying to hurry, I stepped on some rocks or something and twisted it. Again. This time I did a bang-up job on it, so I guess I will be grounded at least 3 days. Otherwise, things are about the same for me. I don't know if I told you before, but I did get a letter from Glenna the other day thanking me for the bracelet. Do you remember right after I got over here, I bought some pictures painted on silk and never sent them home? Well, I had to fold them up to put in a box so I could keep them. Now they are kind of wrinkled and they have a paper backing, and I don't know if they will look all right. Anyway, what am I getting at is, I think I will go ahead and box them up and send them to you. There are 4 of them. I want you to give Laverne 2 of them and give the other 2 to whoever you want. But don't keep any of these. I will bring you 4 of them when I come home. But I got to thinking that I hadn't sent Laverne anything from here, and I know she will like these. I can't send them until payday because I am broke, and I'm trying to keep from borrowing any money. But when you see her, tell her that I am going to send her a birthday present. Another thing you can go ahead and do is get the boys' measurements and send them to me. I want to get us all a jacket made alike. When you do send me the measurements, make them just a wee bit big so that they will fit the boys when I get home. I want to have them made and bring them with me. By the time you get this letter, I will be down to 6 months. I'll sure be glad when they are over. These last 6 seem like a lifetime. I'm sure looking forward to those pictures you promised me. Oh, yes. Do you remember that black mynah bird that we saw in a service station once? He could talk. Well, there is a guy here who went to Saigon yesterday and bought himself one of those darn things. He paid a little less than $1 for it, and in the States they cost about $50. I personally wouldn't want one, but I thought that was something. Well, enough for today. Tell the boys I miss them, and I love you all very much. All my love, Bill. Today's letter is a rich snapshot of Poppy's life at this point in the war. Not just the day-to-day grind of his missions, but the way his mind is constantly stretched between 2 worlds. The one he's living in and the one he's longing to get back to. One of the strongest threads running through this letter is how much Poppy is already imagining life at home, even while he's still halfway across the world. He's making plans for jackets he wants made for him and his boys, for gifts to send back to his family, even for the silk paintings he's been holding on to since he first arrived in Vietnam. There's this quiet sense of hopefulness buried in the routine of letter writing. The idea that small gestures like sending a present or planning matching jackets can help bridge the distance between him and his family. I can't help but wonder if making plans for when he comes home gets him through the war. He paints a picture of his life at the end of it, and it keeps his mind off of all the ways he could lose his life in a second while flying, walking around the base, or simply acting within the basic parameters of his job. At the same time, there's a little more vulnerability coming through here than in some of the previous letters. His ankle injury, which started as a funny story about trying to rescue Charlie, is now keeping him grounded for a few days. He doesn't dwell on it or complain, but the way he talks about it, trying to avoid borrowing money, hints at the financial strain that soldiers and their families were often under. He's careful about how he frames everything, always trying to reassure Suzie without hiding the reality of what he's going through. His statements about being broke are informed by the letter we saw a few days ago, talking about running out of money and giving me more suggestions on how to handle his family. The mention of the black mynah bird at the end adds a surprising detail. One of those odd everyday moments that must have stood out against the backdrop of war. It's the kind of observation that makes you realize how much Bill was noticing the world around him, even in the middle of all the stress and exhaustion. And maybe that's the part of what helped him get through this time. Holding on to these small, almost playful details in a place where most of his day was defined by danger. I can tell you with certainty that Meemaw would not have been interested in these birds. She believes birds are beautiful, but, unfortunately, is deadly afraid of them. I am told she was attacked by a rooster while visiting a farm as a girl, and has been scared of them ever since. I've also been told that when I brought my parrot to her house when I was growing up, it was a big deal. The photo I chose for today appears to feature a bunch of Vietnamese civilians. This is a part of a series of photos that Popi took. It appears as if they are transporting them. Perhaps they are refugees or VIPs for the South Vietnamese. Many of the women have children on their backs. What did Popi think of when he saw these kids? Did they remind him of his own? "20. Mar, 65. Dearest Suzie, I got that nice long letter you wrote last night and was tickled to death with it. Then today I got the pictures of you and Brian and Brett. I'm just sorry that you couldn't get me one of Billy, but I'm really happy with the ones that you did send. I just took time out to feed Charlie. The club had pineapple chunks for dessert today, so I got him a cup of that. He loves it. Of course he loves just about everything. I have him tied up by the club, so he never has to do without anything to eat. I was given a chance to take a 3-day pass in Bangkok on the 26th. Since I haven't had a pass in about 3 months, I figured I had better not turn this one down. So I took it. Now I'll have to borrow some money to go, but I need to get away from here for a couple of days. This is something a little different because normally to go to Bangkok or Hong Kong, you have to go for 5 or 7 days, which is too long for me. I was scheduled for R&R next month, and I was going to take it in Saigon, but like I said, over here, you have to take it when you can. By the way, I still have my little black clouds. I'll tell you about them later. I'm relieved to see that you got your bonds cashed with no trouble. On the next bond you get, see if it doesn't say me or you. I think I had them set up that way. Well, I've just about run out of news, and I hate to send you such a short letter after the nice one I got yesterday. So I'll tell you about my latest bad luck, or good luck, whichever way you look at it. Tuesday, I went on my first mission with the Cobras. We found the VC early and proceeded to shoot them up. However, I guess they didn't read the rulebook because they started shooting back. I took a hit that day right through my door. It tore the plastic in my window, and I got my arm sprayed by it, and it burned a little. Nothing serious, though. Wednesday started out real quiet, but about 10 o'clock in the morning, we had an outpost across the river from us, and they called us to help them run off the VC. So we went out there, and there were more of them than we figured, and they had a heck of a lot of machine guns. I flew right over one of them, and without knowing it, I got hit again. This round came up through the floor and missed my foot by less than an inch. We dumped a load of rockets on him, and didn't have any more trouble with him. We fought the VC the rest of that day. About 6 o'clock in the evening, we took one more round, and this one did the trick. It hit a fuel line and knocked us out of the sky. We landed on an island in the river, and it happened to belong to the VC, but they didn't shoot at us. Can't blame them because we had about 6 more armed ships right over us waiting and looking for something to shoot at. But it was real rough there for about 20 minutes. We had a rescue ship land right behind us, but we had to get all our guns and radios out of our ship so the VC couldn't get them. And that was how I twisted my ankle again. Running across those rice paddies with an armful of ammo was too much for it. My ankle is much better now, though, and I'm back flying. I don't want to upset you with all this, but it is all over now, and it is quite an experience. I don't want you to get excited about it, because if you do, then I won't tell you any more of my experiences. I love you all very much and miss you. Take care of yourself and the boys for me. All my love. Bill. In this letter, it feels like the war finally closes in. For 2 days straight, Bill's helicopter came under fire. Not just once, but 3 separate times. The first round tore through his door, close enough to hurt his arm, cut up by pieces of the shattered window. The second missed his foot by less than an inch. And the third, that one finally brought him down. Cut through a fuel line and forced him to crash land on a small island controlled by the very enemy he'd been fighting. It's the kind of story that could fill an entire letter, but the kind of moment you'd expect to feel weighty and full of fear. But that's not how Bill tells it. He holds it at a distance, wrapping the most dangerous experience of his deployment in the same steady, matter-of-fact tone he uses to talk about Charlie the monkey or the pineapple chunks he saved for the mess hall. Even when he's describing running across rice paddies with an armful of ammunition, he writes about it like it's just another bad luck story, another little black cloud hanging over his head. What stands out most in this letter isn't what Bill says, it's what he doesn't. There's no mention of fear, no hint of how those 20 minutes stranded behind enemy lines must have felt. Instead, there's a gentle warning tucked in near the end. I don't want to upset you with all this, because if you do, then I won't tell you any more of my experiences. It's a line that says so much more than it seems to on the surface. For months now, these letters have been holding Bill and Suzie together. A thin, fragile thread stretched across half the world. But that thread only works if he keeps writing, and if she keeps reading without letting the fear creep in too deeply. By asking her not to worry, Bill's not just protecting Suzie. He's protecting the letters themselves. He's protecting himself from feeling fear towards the very danger he's experiencing every day. There's a quiet kind of courage in that, in the way he keeps showing up on the page day after day, telling her only what she needs to know. Even now, 60 years later, it's hard not to wonder what he left out. The photo I chose for today depicts the side of an attack helicopter. It has a machine gun wrapped in a tarp, and below that, a rocket tube. The inside of the helicopter is loaded with ammunition and has 2 large machine guns. March 22, 1965. Dearest Suzie, I got 2 letters from you today and was real happy to get them. I'm surprised that Brian even remembers his dad, much less cry for me. The last 2 days were pretty quiet for us. We went out and escorted a general all around today. It was very boring. I played 2 games of pinochle last night and 2 tonight. I'm just about played out. Charlie is the same. If he survives this year, I still plan to bring him home. Well, I hate to write such a short letter, but there isn't much going on. Tell Billy that I am pleased with his grades, but I agree with you that he could do better. I love you all and miss you very much. All my love. Bill. I can recall 2 of the first stories I was told about my grandfather's time in Vietnam. The first brings my father to tears. He can't manage to tell the story straight without laughing. Popi was flying on an attack mission, and one of his side gunners was shooting a lot at the VC on the ground. Popi had to quickly turn to avoid something, and the helicopter rocked with the turn. As a result, a shell from the machine gun the man was firing managed to slide into his pants and settle near his testicles. The punchline of the story is when the man angrily tells my dad at the reunion that they were at that my grandpa is the reason he only has 1 ball. Meanwhile, my grandfather sat there, unamused. I'm sure he credits himself for the man's survival. The second story isn't as funny. In fact, it's quite heroic, noble. The kind of story a kid tells about their dad when their dad is the coolest guy in the world and everyone should be proud of him. They were flying information and shooting rockets at a village. As Popi went in to allow his rocketeer to fire, a woman stepped outside of a hut and held up a baby. Popi quickly flew out of formation and back to base. When all was said and done, his commanding officer was angry with him and proceeded to chew him out for his inability to follow orders. Quote, calling him everything but a good Christian, as my dad put it. When the man finished, Popi pulled out his pistol, held it to the man's throat, and said that if he ever wanted him to blow up kids again, or if he ever spoke to him in that manner once more, he'd shoot him dead on the spot. Popi only told this story after they saw the man at a reunion, and he was nice to my grandfather. Popi still hated his guts that many years later. With no way to prove the story true or contest it, I'm left with a story. Perhaps it is true. My grandfather is a noble hero, fighting against orders to protect the innocent. Maybe he was already racked with guilt after he bombed the orphanage and didn't know about it until after the fact. Perhaps he saw the face of one of his own kids on the ground, being held up by the woman. What's important is that I've been told the story many times and by many family members. Are they using it to justify what he did over there? To paint him as one of the good guys? Or maybe they're telling it because it's foundational to their understanding of his time away. When you're given nothing, you're left to your imagination. What's true? Would anyone's perception of him change if this wasn't true? What's more important, the authenticity of the story or the perception of Popi as a hero, as someone who would rather kill his own commanding officer instead of killing a child? Upon reflection, it's likely that these 2 stories could have only occurred when he was with the Cobras, when he was spending more time with rockets and machine guns than he was around bandages and ambulances. I'm still having a hard time wrapping my head around his decision to join the Cobras. Why put yourself in greater danger? Why allow boredom to consume your heart instead of fear? The photo I chose for today shows 3 Huey helicopters flying in formation. The one on the left has a door gunner hanging outside of it. March 1965. Dearest Suzie, how are you and the boys getting along? I hope that you are all right. Things have been pretty quiet around here the last couple of days. Yesterday, I made one trip to the range, and today we went twice. I am still flying the hog. I got a birthday card from the folks yesterday and no mail at all today. Tomorrow, we have a troop lift, and then tomorrow night, I'm supposed to go to Saigon and catch a plane for Bangkok Friday morning. I will only have 2 nights there, but that is plenty. Mainly, I just want to get away from here for a while. I haven't been away from Vinh Long since we came back from Da Nang, and that is a long time to look at hooches, GIs, and slopeheads. I have enclosed that slide of my so-called mustache. It didn't turn out worth a darn. Lewis took this picture with his camera. He gets twice as many pictures as I do on a roll of film. I don't know how this will be on your little viewer, but they show up real nice from a projector. I have borrowed Lewis's camera for my trip to Bangkok since mine is not back yet. So, all the pictures I get there will be this size. We made this picture when I was still flying troop ships, slicks. That's why the sign is up there. Oh yes, I almost forgot. I guess I started something here when I bought Charlie. I told you about the mynah bird. Well, another guy bought him 3 little birds the other day. I don't know what kind they are, but they are beautiful. Then yesterday, another guy came back from Saigon with a Japanese poodle, solid black. And just out of this world. I have already made up my mind to get one if I can find one like that, and if I can ship it home. Purebred. They cost less than $5. So if I can get one and send it home right away, that is what you'll get next month. But don't get your hopes up. I don't know if I can send one or not. But anyway, on our little 2-company compound now, we have 22 dogs, mostly just mutts, 3 monkeys, 1 baboon, 1 mynah bird, and 3 other little birds. And guess who is still the most popular? Of course, Charlie. Charlie is just about a year old now, I guess, and his little thing is starting to get hard every once in a while. I told you about the little girl monkey we have. Well, Charlie knows what he wants to do, and I guess he gets the urge, but he can't figure out how to go about it. So Doll is still a virgin. Every afternoon, though, there is a crowd around here waiting to see old Charlie make out. It is really funny. And of course, she is always around him trying to get him. But he will grow up one day. Well, today is the top of the hill for me. The last roster we got listed my date of expected return from overseas, Dearest, was 24 September, which is exactly 6 months off. So at least it is all downhill now. Well, that is about it, I guess. I love you all very much and miss you terribly. All my love. Bill. When you're waiting for something, there's always that moment when the time behind you becomes greater than the time ahead. The halfway point. The top of the hill. You can almost feel the gravity shift. That's where Popi found himself on March 23rd, 1965. 6 months down, 6 months to go. He writes to Suzie from Vinh Long, where things have been quiet. The days are filled with routine, training flights to the range and gearing up for a troop lift. But even in the stillness, he's already looking ahead to something different. A few days in Bangkok, 2 nights away from hooches, GIs, and what he calls slope heads. The kind of language that reminds you how deeply embedded racism was in the culture of the war. It's a passing line, almost a throwaway, but it lingers. It becomes another little crack in the way I picture him. The word is a slur. The kind of language that's easy to brush past if you're not looking for it, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. I've been thinking a lot about how soldiers have always had to reshape the people they fight into something less than human. It's a survival mechanism, a way to make the violence feel necessary, maybe even justified. The same man who proudly kept a monkey as a little pet still fell into the habit of stripping away someone else's humanity with a single word. I don't share this to excuse him. Just to remind myself that nobody makes it through a war without being changed by it, by acting in ways that make it easier to do gruesome and inhumane things. In this letter, Popi focuses on one of the few things that seems to bring him joy overseas, the animals. The compound is filling up with dogs, monkeys, birds, and even a baboon. The stray mutts might outnumber the men at this point. And still, the star of the show is Charlie. Popi writes that Charlie's just about a year old at the time, starting to figure out what his body can do, or at least trying to do. There's something so human about it. This little monkey, full of instinct and confusion, with a whole audience of homesick soldiers cheering him on. I picture Popi in the middle of it, leaning against a wall, arms crossed, half watching, half trying not to laugh. What else is there to do but be amused? There's something tender about the way he cares for Charlie, bringing him pineapple chunks from the mess hall, keeping him tied up near the club so he's always fed. It makes me think of how he was with all of us, always quiet, but still a caring and loving presence. The photo I chose for today shows one of the monkeys playing with a dog. There are two soldiers watching, one standing above them and the other sitting behind the action. 29. Mar, 65. Dearest Suzie, well, my Bangkok trip is over, but I really enjoyed it. It was a very interesting city. I had your letter here waiting when I came in, and I guess I better answer the first one. I didn't get the one from Mike yet, though. I realize that you must be worried about Minnie, and I know that she must be having trouble, but unless she is critically ill, I believe that it is unfair to take Billy out of school just to satisfy a whim of hers. I can't see how you could possibly be any help to her other than just being there, and if she is sick, then our boys, because they are very young boys, would very soon get on her nerves. I have one other argument against your going, but I won't use it. If she is still having trouble in June, then I guess my only argument would be that I would worry about you and the boys, but I would let you make the trip with my blessing. I hesitate to say no, but because if anything should happen to her before you get to see her, then I would never forgive myself for not telling you to go ahead. But taking everything into consideration, I feel like you can wait a while to go up there. The best thing that I can think of is for her to come down and see you. But of course, I know she won't do that. But anyway, you know how I feel. You know that I'm not mean or cold-hearted, and I only want you happy, and I realize that you are lonely. But for your sake, Billy's sake, it is bad enough that we have to move him around because of me, and for Minnie's sake, I don't think you should go up there right now. I did some shopping while I was in Bangkok. I lifted up a box of stuff today and got it in the mail to you. There is, in the box, some of that silk enough for one dress and one shirt. It is brocade and very expensive, but you won't get it for about 6 weeks because I sent it boat mail. When you do get it, though, I want you to pick a real nice pattern that you like and get a dressmaker, and I mean a professional dressmaker, to make you a dress. That stuff is so beautiful that I would hate to see it get messed up. I know that you will love it too. The reason I sent it by slow boat is that airmail is so expensive. It is no bargain if you have to go and pay those rates. In addition to that material, I put those silk pictures in the box also. I got myself 2 shirts made from Thai silk. One of them is in there. The reason I sent it is I wore it and it needs to be dry cleaned and I can't get that done over here. That's about all that's in the box. I did throw in an old tape in case you want to tape it and send it back to me. In case you are wondering how I managed this trip, I borrowed $100, and I had a little bit. I have to pay back the $100 payday, but that's no problem, and this trip was well worth it. The reason I jumped at this chance is because it meant only staying 2 nights in Bangkok, so it was just right for me, and these chances don't come often. And believe it or not, I got everything that I wanted and went everywhere that I wanted to while I was there. I took 5 cartons of Salem cigarettes with me and used them for tips. And I got my own personal taxi for 3 cartons for 3 days. So I went sightseeing a lot and took a bunch of pictures. The hotel where I stayed was just beautiful and would have compared well with any in the U.S. My bill was only $15 for the 2 nights and 3 days. When I left here, I only had your things on my mind to do. Relax, call you, sightsee, and get some souvenirs of Bangkok. I've told you about everything else. Now let me tell you about the souvenirs. I got the cloth for you and 2 shirts for me and 2 ties for me that made of silk. I also got you a purse covered with silk to match your dress. I'll bring that to you as well as the rest of this stuff. I also got you another ring. It is called a Thai princess ring and has 8 different kinds of stones on it. I know you will love it. I also bought you one other gift. I didn't intend to when I left here, but when I saw this set, I just had to buy it. Besides sapphires, the Thailand people are best known for the stuff they make out of bronze. If you see Lois anytime soon, ask her what she thinks of Thai bronze. Anyway, I got over there and looked at a few of those bronze dinnerware sets, and they didn't appeal to me. But then I saw this set. It has 144 knives, forks, and spoons. This stuff actually shines better than silver. The handles are made of teak wood. Naturally, I can't send it home, so you will just have to wait to see it, but I guarantee that you'll love it. Now, all I have to do is catch someone going to Hong Kong to get a set of china that I have already picked out, and we are in business. I was going to surprise you with this stuff, but this will give you a reason to look forward to my coming home. Or do you need one? On those jackets for the boys, just send me their shoulder width, sleeve length, waist and neck size. I think that will be enough measurements. I loved hearing your voice the other day, but I feel awfully lonely after I hung up. I liked hearing the boys too. I think Billy wanted to talk more to me, and I didn't give him a chance. But the connection was so bad. And there's so many other things I wanted to tell you and didn't. But please tell Billy that I didn't mean to worry him or sound so cold, but I'll give him all the time to talk to me that he wants when I get home. I love you all and miss you very much. And honey, please don't be mad at me about the way I feel about you going to see Minnie. I know that you are caught in the middle of wanting to help her and doing what I want. But I think if you think about it a while, I'm pretty close to right. This time. All my love, Bill. Poppy's trip to Bangkok had been on the horizon for a little while now. I imagine him packing his bag, trying to figure out how to unwind during his precious 2 days away from Vietnam. What I didn't expect was how much of his time and money he'd spend thinking about the people he left behind. His letter reads like the inside of a suitcase, full of silks, souvenirs, and plans for the family he'd be coming home to. He writes to Suzie about the gifts he picked out: delicate tie silk for a dress and shirt, a purse to match, a princess ring inlaid with 8 stones, and a bronze dinnerware set that he can't wait to show off. Which, by the way, has been sitting in my closet and I cannot think of anything to do with. It's big and heavy. The letter's weighed down with details: how he bartered with American cigarettes to hire a personal taxi for 3 days, how he wore one of his new shirts and carefully packed it back up, dirty but precious, to send home for dry cleaning. It's easy to get swept up in his excitement, picturing the packages slowly making their way across the ocean, but there's tension running underneath the surface. His joy at finding the perfect souvenirs is tangled up with worry. Worry for Suzie, worry for Billy, who he feels he cut off too soon during their rare phone call. He tries to strike a balance, firm in his opinions but still craving connection, still wanting to be a good husband and father, even from half a world away. There's also something deeply human in how he justifies the trip to himself. The borrowed money, the quick itinerary, the need to get away. He doesn't write about how the violence must have been gnawing at him, how even a few days outside of Vietnam might help him feel like himself again. But you can feel it pressing around in the edges. The photo I chose for today was likely taken on one of Poppy's trips outside of Vietnam. There is a chance this was taken in Bangkok. It appears to be a temple or a shrine. March 31, 1965. Dearest Suzie, I'm sorry to hear that you are having so much trouble with the car and the washing machine. It seems like cars are just made to almost hold together till you get them paid for. Anyway, I'm glad to say I'm able to send you a big enough check this month to help you get everything taken care of, including shoes for the boys. I had our bond allotment changed so we would get a $100 bond each month, but I guess it won't be effective till next month. They didn't take it out of my pay, at least, so they better not send you one. I had big hopes of saving some money while I was over here, too. I wanted to come home with about $300 so we could have a good vacation, but I know now that I won't. There are so many things that I want to get from here, and I only have 5 more paydays, so I know I won't be able to save a cent. But at least the car will be paid for before I get home, so we won't be in too bad shape. Everything is about the same here. We had a big scare last night. The VC told us that they were going to blow up the compound, so we were on alert all night, and we still are. But so far, no VC, although they did blow up the American embassy in Saigon yesterday. I'm sure that you have heard about that by now. And of course, town is off limits again. Well, kiss the boys for me, and remember that I love you all very much. All my love, Bill. On March 30th, 1965, a powerful explosion ripped through the American embassy in Saigon. A bomb, hidden in a car parked just outside the building, killed 22 people and injured nearly 200 more, one of the deadliest attacks against Americans in Vietnam up to that point. The embassy bombing sent shockwaves through the country, and through the men stationed just a few hours away in Vinh Long. Popi mentions it almost in passing, tucked in alongside updates about shoes for the boys and car payments back home. He calls it a big scare. The kind of phrase that tries to soften the edges of something much darker. There's no lingering on the details, no speculation about what might happen next, just the bare facts. The embassy was bombed, the Viet Cong threatened to attack their compound, and town was off limits again. It's a reminder of how quickly violence could erupt, and how fragile the illusion of normalcy really was. The days might pass in routine, flying missions, writing letters, shopping for souvenirs, but danger was always just beneath the surface. The Viet Cong's warning turned the night into a long, sleepless wait. The embassy bombing marked a turning point in the war. It was one of the first attacks to show that the Viet Cong could strike deep into the heart of American operations, even in heavily guarded areas. For the men on the ground, it was another crack in whatever sense of safety they might have still held on to. After the bombing, President Johnson released a statement which read, "The terrorist outrage aimed at the American embassy in Saigon shows us once again what the struggle in Vietnam is about. This wanton act of ruthlessness has brought death and serious injury to innocent Vietnamese citizens in the street as well as to American and Vietnamese personnel on duty. I extend my deepest sympathy to the families of all who lost their lives. Outrages like this will only reinforce the determination of the American people and government to continue and to strengthen their assistance and support for the people and government of Vietnam. The embassy is already back in business, and I shall at once request the Congress for authority and funds for the immediate construction of a new chancery for the American embassy in Saigon. This will be one more symbol of our solidarity with the people of Vietnam. It is they who are the real targets of the communist aggressors." Led by Ambassador Johnson, the Americans in Vietnam have once again shown outstanding qualities of courage and coolness. They have the admiration of their countrymen. That being said, I wonder what this bombing and the subsequent statement can teach us about our present moment, about our response to these types of violent acts. Does any of this remind you of anything else that has happened in recent years? The photo I chose for today appears to be a large square in a big city, which I assume is Saigon. It has a roundabout with some sort of signage in it and a man-made pond or water feature. The square itself looks to be a big parking lot for bikes or motorcycles. I'm Alex Lowie, and I hope you have enjoyed listening to this episode of Dearest Suzie, and receiving messages from the past that my Popi wrote exactly 60 years ago. I sincerely appreciate your time and interest. Please consider following the podcast on your preferred platform, and if you're enjoying it, I kindly ask that you take the time to rate the show and leave a review. Also, please follow the project on YouTube, X, and Instagram. All likes, comments, shares, and reviews will help grow the reach of this story. The links for these things should be in the description of this episode. Please feel free to email me at dearestsuziepodcast@gmail.com if you have anything you'd like to say. I'd love to chat or to hear about your stories as well. Thank you for listening, and God bless.